Well, hello, welcome again to our reading of the Herodotos, and I'm reading Book 1 up to chapter 86. So at this stage, of course, poor old Kroisos has been taken and caught alive, and Herodotus summarises this here at the beginning. So hoide Persai, but the Persians, Eskon from Echo, they held on to then Sardis, and now this is from Zogrio, so they took Croesus himself alive. Him Arxanta, having ruled for Tessarachaideca for 14 Etia years. Notice this uncontracted form. In Attic it would be ete, and the epsilon alpha would contract to an eta. We're getting the uncontracted form here. So for 14 years, and Tessarachaideca Hemeras, and having been besieged for 14 days. Katatok Cresterion te Katapausanta ten hiauto megalen arcane. And he himself, or he having put an end to his own rule, or his own empire perhaps, in accordance with the oracle. Now you recall the oracle said that if you attack Cyrus, if you attack Persia, a mighty empire will fall. And of course he stupidly thought it was referring to the Persian Empire, and of course it was referring to his own, hence this Katapausanta. So he says, Herodotus says here that he caused his own downfall, basically, in accordance with the oracle. Labontes de auton hoi persai agagon parakuron, and having taken him, the Persians, Agagon from Ago, they brought him to Cyrus. Hode sun nesas. Now this is from sun and neo. Neo is a bird with there's several different neos. This is the one that means to pile up. So he having piled up a pyre, a great pyre, an ebibasi, he caused Croesus to step onto it. So he placed Croesus on it. This is the pyre, and he was bound from deo, perfect passive participle, having been bound in chains. And so him, and also hepta, so twice 7, so that's 14 children of the Lydians beside him. Nasty thing to do. En noo ekon, and then we get ater and ater and ater. So he had it in his mind that either kat agiane is from kat agizdo, to sacrifice. Kat hagizdo, really. But in Attic you would have a theta here, but you'd get deaspiration in Ionic. So it's from kat hagidzo, which is to sacrifice. This is the future infinitive here. So having in mind, whether having in mind kat agizdon, to sacrifice these as these first fruits, acrothenia, this is the first fruits of victory, to hotio theon, to one of the gods, in fact, or wishing epitelesai, to complete a euchain, a prayer, or perhaps a vow here. So having in mind, so whether he had in mind that he was going to sacrifice these first fruits of victory to one of the gods, in fact, or whether he had in mind, or whether he was wishing to fulfill a vow, or whether also, having perceived that Kroisos to be theosebia, from theosebase, third declension, adjective, being a God respecter, so being a God-fearer, being a religious man, on account, for this reason, he put him up on the pyre, Boulominos, wishing Adonai to know, atis daimonon, whether a certain one of the gods, of the divinities, Rusatai, will save him, min for auton, and save him, and we get 2 plus the infinitive. It's an aorist passive infinitive from katakio. You get a vowel gradation to cow, and this is the aorist passive infinitive. So to save him from being, so as not to be burnt alive. In other words, to save him from being burnt alive, but literally to save him so that he was not burnt alive. Ton mende poiein tauta. Now at this stage, for some reason, Herodotus flips to indirect speech. So we have to sort of supply something like they said. So they said that he did these things in fact. So we get a men and a de. So that he did that on the one hand, but now the subject of this next gets complicated here. I think the top 2 Solonos we take next, and something like the word, the saying of Solon, es elthane, to have come to Kroisos, en estoti, as he was standing upon the pyre, and then kyper, and we get this in the dative as agreeing with Kroisos. So although he was in such kakos, in such a terrible situation, so despite the fact that he was in a terrible situation, the word of Solon came to Kroisos as he was standing on the pyre. Now, hos hoi aa sun theo eramenon. So something like that. That. Now we get aa plus the participle, that it had been said, hoi, I think is by him, that's Solon, sun theo, with the help of the god, so inspired by the god, that there to be no one among the living to be Albion prosperous. So that no one among the living is prosperous. Remember, Solon's saying, in fact, was, call no man happy until he is dead. Call no man albios until he's dead. So rather complicated little section, this bit here. So just to do that again. So so this word of Solon, that it had been said by him, by Solon, with the help of the god, so inspired by the god, that among those living there is no one to be happy or prosperous. I think the top goes with the anai. Hos de ara min prostenai tuto, and the prostenai, literally it stood beside him, so perhaps it occurred to him, and thus this occurred to min, him, so perhaps when this occurred to him, anene carmenon. Now this is very, very strange. I had to look up the LSJ for this one. It's from anaphero is the verb, and they say that it means something like having raised, or rather having brought up a deep breath, a deep drawn breath for anaphero here, and hence having the sense of having made a deep sigh. So I'll just have to take that as it is. So having made a deep sigh and having groaned, so having called out, now ek poles hesukias, after much quietness, so after being silent, he he raised a deep voice and called out or screamed out 3 times to name Solon, or Solon as we say. Kaiton Kuron and Cyrus Acusanta, having heard, he bid, we're getting all these accusative and infinitive constructions, he bid the Hermeneas, the interpreters, ep a rest there, to inquire from Kroisos who was this man that he was calling upon. And they say that those approaching him to have made inquiry, to have asked him. But they say that Kroisos, now we get a men and a debt here, always look out for the men's and debts, they're very useful. So they say that Kroisos, Heos, while he was having been asked, they say that he maintained his silence, he kept silence, so maintained silence. So while he was being asked, he kept silence. Metadeb, but afterwards, hos einenkadzata. So, but afterwards he spoke, to have said what the name was, when he was being compelled, from anankazdo. It's a passive imperfect here. Ton an egerpasi turanoisi pro etimesa megalon crematon eslogus elthe. This is a very awkward passage here. So I think it means something like, so Kroisos says, I was talking about the one whom now we get an an with the main verb here, I would prefer or honour more than great wealth, literally much money, that he, that is Solon, came to discourse with all the tyrants, with all the despots. So it's a fairly obscure line here. So something like, I was referring to the man whom I would prefer to engage in dialogue with all rulers, and I'd prefer that to have that happen more than much money. Hostesvi asema ephrazde. And I like this line here, but when he spoke, things which are unintelligible spe to them. Well, I'm not surprised. This earlier line here was unintelligible to me for a while. It's not an easy line. So since he was speaking things unintelligible to them, ep a rotone. It's an alpha contract verb. So they were asking him again the things being said, so what he had said. Lipario is to persist, so we get genitive absolute here. So they persisting, literally, and providing oklon. Well, oklon means a crowd in later Greek. It some people take this here as making a nuisance of themselves, or perhaps just translate the whole thing by harassing him for the oklon. So when they persisted and began harassing him, he said, in fact, that Solon, being an Athenian, had come to his arcane, came to his empire, and having seen all the prosperity of himself, apophlaurissae from apophlauristo, he treated it as a joke, he treated it lightly, treated it slightingly, and then in brackets, having said, in fact, Hoya, such things, I might say, having spoken such and having said such and such, hoste auto panta apobebekoi, this is from apobino, to turn out, yes, so, and all things to have turned out for him, sorry, but when all things turned out that way for him, turned out in the way in which, indeed, Kyros, that man, that Solon, Ape, said, Uden timalon es hiaton legon, and then in brackets, square brackets, which I think we're not meant to read here, es hapan to anthropinon, Kaimalis tus paras visiautois olbios dokiontos anai. Now it's here, it's something like speaking or saying nothing very much in regards to himself, so not speaking so much in regard to himself than, or perhaps as in English, as to every human being, and especially those thinking to those thinking to themselves to be albius, prosperous. So we said there's not so much in regards to himself, but it's in regard to every human being, and especially to those thinking para spici autoisi, to themselves, to be prosperous. Ton men Kroison tauta ape geestai, and they say that Cyrus to relate that he related these things. Now we've got a men and a de. So Kroisos is relating all these things, but we get a genitive absolute here, that the pyre, hamenes, is from hapto. This is a perfect passive participle from hapto, to be, so to light, and this is to be lit, and that the pyre now being lit, kaiesthai, was burning ta peri escata, around the edges, that is the edges of the pyre. So they've lit it from the outside, presumably, from the edges, and they're now on fire. Ton de kuron accusanta ton hermenion ta Kroisos api, and they say that Cyrus, having heard from the interpreters, this is from genitive noun here, the things which Kroisos said, meta gnonta, having changed his mind, kai en no santa. This is from en and not eo. So having realized that this same, that, he himself, that is Cyrus, being a human being, is giving, and it's in the optative because it's in past, so he realized that he is giving another human being alive to the fire, a human being having been no less in prosperity than himself. So again, a little bit tricky there with the word order. So having changed his mind and having realized that he himself, being a human being, was giving another human being alive to the fire, one who had been in prosperity no less than himself. And pros tutoisi, and in addition to these things, de santa ten tissin. This is from Tissus, connected with Tino. It means vengeance, and it's often divine vengeance, Tissus. There's a wonderful poem of Alkmaar which begins, or the part we have begins, there is a certain thing which is the vengeance from the gods. It's the same word, Tissus. So in addition to these things, fearing revenge, probably divine revenge, kai epilexamenon, and having said in addition that there was nothing, now ekon with an adverb translates the verb to be, so there was nothing being secure or safe, there would be nothing among men being safe, so nothing among mankind is secure. So having done all that, they say that he bid them tan takistain as quickly as possible, spenunai, from spenuni, to quench the burning fire, kai kata bibazdain, and to bring Kroisos down, and also those that were with Kroisos. And they say that those who were attempting to do this, they say that they were not able anymore, ek kratesai, to get mastery over the fire. So the fire had got completely out of control. And that's the end of chapter 86.